The art of being undervalued by your own flesh and blood is that eventually you grow numb to the sting. It becomes as predictable as the seasons, especially during family gatherings where tradition dictates your place at the table, always at the far end, away from the important conversations. At least that's what I told myself as I pulled my modest sedan into the circular driveway of my uncle's sprawling Tudor mansion in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, where our family's Thanksgiving had been held for the past 15 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Olivia Martinez, though to my family I'm just Liv, the dreamer who never quite measured up to the Martinez standard of success. I'm 37 now, and the charcoal pantsuit I wore was from a mid-range department store, perfectly acceptable in any normal setting. But here, among the designer labels and family heirlooms, it was another reminder of my supposed shortcomings. I kept it simple on purpose. No need to attempt impressing those who had already written my life's conclusion. Not yet. Well, if it isn't our resident idea girl, my cousin Diego called out from the grand entrance, swirling an amber-colored drink in a crystal tumbler. Liv the Livewire, still shocking us all by showing up after last year's incident. His voice carried just enough for the others mingling in the foyer to turn and watch my arrival. I offered a measured smile, trying not to recall how last Thanksgiving ended with Uncle Raphael suggesting I get serious about joining the family. Business instead of chasing digital pipe dreams. Diego, I nodded, clutching my leather portfolio a little tighter. Inside were the documents that would change everything by dessert. Always a pleasure to be the subject of the welcome committee. As I stepped into the mansion, the familiar scent of cinnamon and wealth enveloped me. Crystal chandeliers caught the late afternoon sun, casting prism-like patterns across marble floors. Family photos lined the walls, chronicling the Martinez legacy, each frame a reminder of what success was supposed to look like. My face appeared in exactly 3 photos, always at the edge, as if the camera itself knew I was an afterthought. "Olivia, darling." Aunt Victoria glided toward me in a cloud of expensive perfume, air-kissing both cheeks. "We were betting on whether you'd actually come this year. Raphael won." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, mentally calculating how many minutes until I could reveal why I'd really come. The living room was populated with the usual suspects. Uncle Raphael holding court by the fireplace, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting the authority that had built Martinez Financial Group from a small investment firm to a regional powerhouse. Cousin Gabriella showing off her new engagement ring to anyone who'd look, the diamond catching light like a small planet. Her fiancé Jason, another investment banker, nodding along to whatever my brother Marco was saying about market trends. "Liv," Marco spotted me, his greeting carrying the practiced warmth of someone who remembered he should acknowledge his sister. "Didn't think you'd make it. How's the, what are you calling it these days? App? Platform? Startup?" Before I could answer, Aunt Victoria cut in with a sharp laugh. "Oh, Marco, don't encourage her. I read that article about how most of these tech startups fold within 3 years. What is this now? Year 4 of your experiment?" "Year 5, actually," I corrected, placing my portfolio on a side table, making sure it was visible. Just a few more hours. The room shifted as my father entered from another doorway, his presence commanding immediate attention. Gabriel Martinez, Chief Investment Officer of Martinez Financial, a man who measured worth in portfolios and pedigrees. His eyes found mine, and there it was. That flicker of disappointment he'd never learned to disguise. "Olivia," he said, the 2 syllables somehow containing an entire critique of my life choices. "You're looking, well." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, accepting the lukewarm embrace that followed. "How's the new office expansion going?" His face brightened, always eager to discuss business triumphs. "Ahead of schedule. We're looking at..." opening 3 new branches across the Midwest by spring. The board just approved the capital expenditure yesterday. I nodded, knowing from my intelligence that the approved expansion was built on financial projections that were optimistic at best, fraudulent at worst. The house of cards that was Martinez Financial's growth strategy was about to come tumbling. Down, and only I knew it. "Dinner in 15, Aunt Victoria announced, gesturing toward the dining room where staff were putting final touches on the elaborate table setting. "Olivia," my cousin Gabriella sidled up to me, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "That pantsuit is practical. I'm actually clearing out my closet next week if you want some hand-me-downs." "Designer, of course." I smiled. "I'm good, but thanks for thinking of me." "Of course," she patted my arm. "We all do what we can for family, even the ones who choose different paths." As she walked away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Zoe, my chief operations officer. "Documents filed. Press release scheduled for Friday, 9 a.m. Perfect timing. Who's messaging you on Thanksgiving?" Diego peered over my shoulder, always intrusive. "Don't tell me it's work. Surely your little app thing can survive without you for one dinner." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I locked my screen. Actually, it can't. That's why I have staff working today. Diego laughed loud enough for others to turn. "Staff? You have staff now? What, like a virtual assistant in the Philippines?" Before I could respond, Uncle Raphael's booming voice called everyone to the dining room. I grabbed my portfolio and followed the procession of Martinez success stories into the ornate dining space where the family hierarchy would be reinforced through seating arrangements. As expected, Uncle Raphael took the head of the table with Aunt Victoria to his right. My father sat at the other end, flanked by Marco and his wife Sophia. I was placed between cousin Gabriella's fiancé Jason and great-aunt Lucia, who was hard of hearing and mostly interested in the cranberry sauce. The first course arrived, brought by staff in crisp uniforms who moved silently around the table. Butternut squash soup with truffle oil, because simple pumpkin soup wasn't Martinez enough. "Olivia," Aunt Victoria addressed me between delicate sips. "I saw the most interesting article about career transitions for people in their later 30s. Very inspiring stories about people who finally found their true calling after years of searching." The implication hung in the air like heavy perfume. "How thoughtful of you to think of me," I replied. "But I'm actually quite satisfied with my current path." Uncle Raphael chuckled. "Ah, youth. Persistence is admirable, Olivia, but there comes a time when one must recognize a dead end." The Martinez name could open so many doors for you in the financial sector. "I remember when you left that promising position at Goldman," my father added, disapproval evident in his tone. 5 years, and what do you have to show for it? A website that connects. What was it again? DataSphere connects enterprise-level businesses with advanced predictive analytics and machine learning solutions, I recited, having explained this at least a dozen times at previous family gatherings. "We transform raw data into actionable business intelligence." Blank stares around the table, followed by uncomfortable shifting. "So, it's like Google for companies?" Jason asked, clearly trying to be helpful but missing the mark entirely. Marco snorted. "No wonder she's struggling if she can't even explain what she does in simple terms." "I'm not struggling," I said evenly, though no one seemed to hear. "Speaking of thriving," Diego interjected, "the Martinez Family Foundation just secured that partnership with Capital One for our financial literacy program. $10 million over 5 years. Dad's meeting with their CEO next week to sign the final papers." Murmurs of approval circled the table. Aunt Victoria beamed with pride. "That's what happens when you build a real business with a real reputation. dear. The main course arrived. Traditional turkey with all the trimmings, but elevated with gourmet touches that screamed old money. As platters were passed and wine was poured, the conversation drifted to safe territory. Marco's new summer, house, Gabriella's wedding plans, and of course the ever-expanding glory of Martinez Financial. I ate quietly, watching the self-congratulatory circus unfold around me. They had no idea what was coming. No inkling that their legacy was built on shifting sands. No concept that the black sheep at the end of the table had outmaneuvered them. All. The turning point came with the dessert, pumpkin cheesecake with bourbon caramel sauce. As plates were distributed, Uncle Raphael raised his glass. "A toast," he announced, "to the Martinez family and our continued prosperity. This year has been our most profitable yet, with the new wealth management division exceeding all projections. And next year promises to be even better with our expansion plans." Glasses clinked around the table. I raised mine slightly, just enough to appear participatory. "Olivia," Uncle Raphael's attention swung to me like a spotlight. "Perhaps it's time you reconsidered your position. There's always room for family at Martinez Financial. You could start in client relations, work your way up. What do you say? Ready to join the real world?" I set my glass down carefully. The room seemed to hold its breath, remembering last year's heated exchange. But this time, I had an ace up my sleeve. "Actually, Uncle Raphael, I wanted to discuss something about Martinez Financial with all of you." My father frowned. "This is hardly the time or place for another of your alternative business ideas, Olivia." "It's not an idea," I said, reaching for my portfolio. "It's more of an announcement." Diego rolled his eyes. "Here we go. Let me guess. Your app finally got 100 users?" I smiled, sliding the portfolio toward the center of the table. "Not quite. My company, Datasphere, just completed its Series D funding round last week. We raised $380 million at a $4.2 billion valuation." The table fell silent. Forks paused midair. That's impossible," Marco stammered, the first to recover. "You're making this up." "I'm not," I replied calmly, "but that's not the announcement." "$4 billion?" Gabriella whispered, her enormous engagement ring suddenly looking less impressive. "What's the announcement, Olivia?" my father asked, his tone uncharacteristically cautious. I opened the portfolio and removed a single document, sliding it toward Uncle Raphael. "Datasphere's board has approved an acquisition offer," I said, watching his face as he scanned the paper. "We're buying Capital Tech Analytics." Uncle Raphael's face drained of color. "Capital Tech is our primary data provider. They're not for sale. We have an exclusivity agreement." "Had an agreement," I corrected. "They've been looking for buyers. For months. Your team missed the signals." My father grabbed the document from Uncle Raphael, his eyes darting across the page. "This can't be right. Capital Tech powers our entire predictive model system. Our exclusivity contract expires next week," I finished for him, "and won't be renewed. In fact, effective January 1st, all Martinez Financial access to Capital Tech's systems will be terminated unless—" "Unless what?" Aunt Victoria demanded, her perfectly manicured hand trembling slightly as she reached for her wine. I reached back into my portfolio and pulled out another document, thicker this time, bound in a leather folder embossed with the Datasphere logo. "Unless you sign this new service agreement," I said, placing it before my father. "The terms are quite different from your previous arrangement. You'll find them on page 12. The room was so quiet you could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. My father flipped to page 12, and his jaw visibly tightened. "This is highway robbery," he muttered. "These rates are triple what we're currently paying." I shrugged. "Market value for proprietary technology. Take it or leave it. Though without access to Capital Tech systems, I imagine those new branches might need to be reconsidered. Diego lunged for the contract, scanning it frantically. You can't do this. This is family. Family, I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Interesting concept to invoke now. My phone rang, a premeditated call from my executive assistant. I answered, putting it on speaker deliberately. Ms. Martinez, I'm sorry to interrupt your holiday, but Mr. Chen from Technova is on the line about the acquisition announcement. The press is asking for comments on how this will affect Martinez Financial's operations. Tell them I'll call. Back in 10 minutes, I replied, ending the call and looking around the table at the shocked faces of my family. Now, where were we? You've been planning this, my father said, a statement rather than a question. For years, I acknowledged. Ever since you all laughed me out of the boardroom when I suggested investing in data analytics as the future of financial services. Remember that meeting, Uncle Raphael? When you said I should stick to social media since that's what girls understand? Uncle Raphael had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was a different time, Olivia. We didn't mean... Save it. I cut him off. The contract needs to be signed by December 1st. Otherwise, we'll be offering exclusive access to your competitors. The remainder of dessert was left untouched as tension thickened the air. Gabriella excused herself, pulling Jason along. Marco stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and newfound respect. My father and Uncle Raphael huddled at the end of the table, whispering urgently. Aunt Victoria leaned toward me, her voice low. Why are you doing this, Olivia? This is your family's legacy you're threatening. I'm not threatening anything, I replied. I'm offering a business solution to a business problem. Isn't that what we Martinezes do best? As the table cleared and family members dispersed, in various states of shock, I gathered my portfolio and prepared to leave. In the foyer, my father caught up with me. Olivia, wait, he said, his authoritative tone replaced by something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. We need to discuss this further. Come to the office tomorrow. We can work something out. I turned to face him. I have meetings all day tomorrow. Send your legal team to the DataSphere offices on Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. You don't need to do this, he said, lowering his voice. There's still a place for you at Martinez Financial, a real position with authority, director level. I couldn't help but laugh. You still don't get it, do you? I don't want a place at your table anymore. I built my own. As I reached for the door, he said the words I never thought I'd hear from Gabriel Martinez. Please, Olivia, we need you on this. I paused, savoring the moment. That's the first true thing you've said to me in years, Dad. See you Monday. Outside, the crisp November air felt like freedom. I slid into my car. Not the luxury vehicle everyone expected from a billionaire CEO, but the same sensible sedan. I'd arrived in. Appearances could be deceiving. That was the lesson I'd learned from the Martinez family, and the one I'd just taught them in return. As I pulled away from the mansion, my phone buzzed with messages. From Zoe about the press. Release from our legal team about the contracts. From our marketing department about the announcement strategy. The real world was calling, and in that world, I wasn't Liv the disappointment. I was Olivia Martinez, the woman who had just brought a financial dynasty to its knees with nothing but intelligence, persistence, and the underestimation of those who should have known better. The ultimate revenge wasn't just succeeding, it was succeeding so spectacularly that those who dismissed you have no choice but to acknowledge your worth. As the mansion disappeared in my rearview mirror, I allowed myself a smile. The Martinez legacy would continue, just not in the way any of them had imagined. This was just the beginning. By Monday morning, they would understand exactly what they had overlooked all these years. And when they begged for my signature on a more reasonable contract, I would remind them of every dismissive comment, every condescending smile, every time they relegated me to the kids' table even as an adult with multiple advanced degrees. Success was indeed the best revenge. and mine was just getting started. The drive back to my downtown Chicago penthouse should have been triumphant. In many ways, it was. The expression on Uncle Raphael's face when he realized I held his company's technological lifeline in my hands was worth every dismissive comment I'd endured over the years. But triumph, I was discovering, tasted more complex than I'd imagined. I pulled into the private garage beneath my building, nodding to the security guard who recognized my sedan. Not the flashy sports car or luxury SUV my cousins drove, but a deliberate choice. Keeping my true net worth concealed had strategic advantages. I'd learned that from watching my family flaunt their wealth while missing the business currents shifting beneath them. "Evening, Ms. Martinez." The doorman greeted me as I entered the lobby. "Happy Thanksgiving." "Thanks, Leo. How's your son's college applications going?" His face brightened. "He got early acceptance to Northwestern yesterday. That scholarship program you told us about made all the difference." "That's fantastic," I replied, genuinely pleased. Unlike my family, I remembered the details of people's lives, not because it was good business, but because it mattered. The elevator whisked me to the penthouse floor. As the doors opened directly into my foyer, I kicked off my sensible heels and finally allowed the tension to leave my shoulders. The wall of windows revealed Chicago's glittering skyline, a constellation of lights reflecting off Lake Michigan. This view had cost 7 figures, but I never took it for granted. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet from a bottle that cost more than my first month's rent after college and sank into my sofa, replaying the evening's events. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "Operation Turkey Drop successful? Details needed ASAP." I smiled at her eagerness. Zoe Chen had been with me from the beginning, the first person to see potential in what was then just an algorithm scribbled in notebooks. Now she was COO of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise and still my closest friend. "Mission accomplished," I texted back. "Full debrief tomorrow. Family suitably shocked." A moment later, "Better than Christmas bonus. Can't wait." I set my phone down and walked to the built-in bookcase that covered one wall of my living room. Hidden among business texts and first edition novels was a worn leather journal, my first business plan for DataSphere, written 7 years ago when I still believed my family would support my vision. I flipped it open, running my fingers over the enthusiastic notes and projections. So naive, so optimistic. I remembered carrying this exact notebook into the Martinez financial boardroom, believing my Harvard MBA and 2 years at Goldman Sachs would earn me at least a fair hearing. Instead, I'd faced a firing squad of condescension. Data analytics is a bubble market, Uncle Raphael had declared, barely skimming my meticulously prepared presentation. "This isn't what clients want from financial services," my father had added. "They want tradition, stability, handshakes, not algorithms." "Maybe we should let Olivia handle our Instagram account," Diego had suggested, earning chuckles around the table. I'd left that meeting with my notebook clutched to my chest, humiliation burning hot on my cheeks. But rather than dissuade me, their dismissal had crystallized my determination. That night, I'd withdrawn my trust fund, the bare minimum financial acknowledgement of my Martinez lineage, and used it as seed funding for what would become DataSphere. The first year had been brutal. Working from a converted studio apartment, sleeping on a futon beside my desk, living on ramen and determination. I poached 2 brilliant data scientists from tech giants by promising equity instead of immediate salary. Together, we built the prototype of what would become the industry's most sophisticated predictive analytics engine. I took a sip of wine, remembering the day our first major client signed on, a mid-sized insurance company willing to take a chance on our unproven technology. Within 6 months, we'd helped them reduce risk exposure by 32% and increase profitable policy segments by 28%. Word spread. More clients followed. Then came the pivotal moment. discovering that Martinez Financial relied heavily on Capital Tech Analytics for their data services, a vulnerability hiding in plain sight. My family had been so certain of their market position that they'd outsourced their most critical technological infrastructure to a third party that, I learned through industry connections, was quietly looking for buyers. It had taken 3 years of growth, 2 funding rounds, and every connection I'd cultivated to position DataSphere as the perfect acquirer for Capital Tech. The irony was exquisite. My family had laughed at my focus on data analytics, and now, that same focus had given me leverage over their entire operation. My phone rang, pulling me from my memories. My father's name flashed on the screen. Interesting. I hadn't expected to hear from him until tomorrow at the earliest. I let it ring twice more before answering. "Hello, Dad." "Olivia." His voice sounded strained, lacking its usual authoritative resonance. "We need to talk." "I believe I mentioned Monday would be—" "This can't wait until Monday," he interrupted. "Capital Tech just sent notice they're restricting our data access effective immediately, pending the acquisition. Our systems are already showing degraded performance." I frowned. That wasn't part of my plan. The acquisition wasn't scheduled to fully close until next week, and service interruptions weren't supposed to begin until after formal notification. "That shouldn't be happening," I said honestly. "The transition plan doesn't include service reductions until after the formal announcement." "Well, something's happening," he snapped, a hint of the old Gabriel Martinez returning. "Our trading algorithms are running on partial data, risk assessments are coming back incomplete, and client portfolio analyses are stalled." I moved to my home office, opening my laptop with one hand while still holding the phone. "Let me look into it. This isn't what I authorized." "I hope not," he replied, tension evident. "Because if Martinez Financial can't generate accurate client reports by Monday morning, we're looking at a significant breach of regulatory requirements. The SEC doesn't accept family drama as an excuse for compliance failures." The implied accusation stung, but he wasn't entirely wrong. I hadn't intended to disrupt their operations this quickly, but I had set events in motion that were now accelerating, beyond my planned timeline. "Give me 30 minutes, I said, already logging into DataSphere's secure system. "I'll call you back." I ended the call and immediately dialed Zoe. She answered on the first ring. "Shouldn't you be enjoying your victory dinner or something?" she asked, the sound of keyboard clicks evident in the background. "Capital Tech is already restricting Martinez Financial's data access. That wasn't supposed to happen until after the public announcement and formal transition." "What?" I could hear her shifting, presumably moving to her computer. "That's not right. The integration schedule is clear. No service changes until closing and formal notification." Someone jumped the gun. My father just called in a panic about degraded systems and potential regulatory issues. "Checking now," she said, her voice taking on the focused tone I knew well. After a moment, she swore under her breath. "It's Derek in integration. He misinterpreted the timeline and initiated preliminary API restrictions as a test without authorization. I'm seeing the override now." Derek Williams was our newly appointed integration director, eager but sometimes overzealous. "Fix it," I said, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Restore full access immediately and get Derek on the phone." "This isn't how we do business." "On it. Should be resolved within 15 minutes. Want me to call your father or will you?" I considered the question. Having my COO call would be the professional move, but this situation required a personal touch. "I'll call him. And Zoe, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. We're better than this." "Absolutely. I'll personally review all integration procedures with the team tomorrow." After ending the call, I waited until I received confirmation that Capital Tech's systems had been fully restored for Martinez Financial. Then I called my father back. "Access should be fully restored now," I said when he answered. It was an Unauthorized action by a staff member that has been corrected. The pause before he responded spoke volumes. I see. This wasn't intentional, I clarified. DataSphere operates with integrity, even during acquisitions. Another pause. That's good to know. The conversation felt oddly formal, neither of us sure how to navigate this new dynamic where I held the power he had always wielded. The full integration plan includes a 60-day transition period with no service interruptions, I explained. Contrary to what you might believe, I have no interest in damaging Martinez Financial's operations. Just in controlling them, he replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. In establishing a fair business relationship, I corrected. Something that wasn't possible when I was just your daughter with impractical ideas. He sighed, a weary sound I rarely associated with the titan of finance. It's late, Olivia. We'll discuss terms on Monday. 9 a.m., I reminded him. We'll be there. After hanging up, I returned to the living room window, watching the city lights with a strange mixture of satisfaction and disquiet. This wasn't how I'd imagined the evening unfolding. The plan had been simple. Reveal my position of strength. At Thanksgiving, let the information simmer over the weekend, and enter negotiations on Monday from a position of absolute leverage. Instead, a careless error had escalated the situation and potentially undermined the professional image I'd worked so hard to build. DataSphere wasn't about revenge, it was about excellence, about proving that data-driven decision-making could transform financial services. The fact that this transformation would humble my family was supposed to be a satisfying side effect, not the primary goal. I returned to my bookshelf and pulled out another volume, this one a financial analysis. Textbook from my Harvard days. Tucked inside was a photograph I rarely looked at, a much younger me standing between my parents at my college graduation. My mother, gone 3 years now after a swift battle with cancer, beaming with genuine pride. My father, looking satisfied, in the way one might upon seeing a long-term investment finally pay dividends. That was the last time I remembered him looking at me with unalloyed approval. After that came my rebellious choice to pursue data science instead of traditional finance, my misguided interest in technology startups, and finally, my incomprehensible decision to leave a prestigious position at Goldman Sachs to found DataSphere. I traced my mother's face in the photograph. She had been the diplomatic one, the bridge between my father's rigid expectations and my determined independence. Without her mediation, our relationship had fractured beyond repair, or so I had believed until tonight. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Zoe had sent the finalized press release for Monday's announcement. The headline read, DataSphere acquires Capital Tech Analytics, expands financial services footprint. The release was polished, professional, focused on strategic synergies and market positioning, no mention of Martinez Financial's dependence on the acquired technology, no hint of the personal satisfaction driving the deal. Just business as it should be. And yet, I set the phone down, suddenly unsure of the path forward. The acquisition made perfect business sense. Capital Tech's established client base and data infrastructure complemented DataSphere's advanced analytics capabilities. The deal would accelerate our growth and establish us as a major player in financial technology. These were facts any business analyst would confirm. But the timing, the dramatic revelation at Thanksgiving dinner, the deliberate withholding of information from my family until the moment of maximum impact, those choices had been personal. I had wanted them to feel what I had felt in that boardroom 7 years ago. Dismissed, then suddenly, devastatingly relevant. Had I become what I despised? Was I now the one wielding power capriciously, conflating business with personal vendettas? My meditation was interrupted by another call, this time from Diego. I almost let it go to voicemail but decided that avoiding confrontation wasn't leadership. Diego, I answered, keeping my tone neutral. What the hell kind of game are you playing? His words slurred slightly, suggesting he'd found comfort in the Martinez wine cellar after dinner. No game, just business. Bullshit, he spat. You deliberately targeted Capital Tech because you knew we depended on them. That's not business. That's sabotage. I moved to my kitchen, pouring a glass of water while I considered my response. Capital Tech was available for acquisition. They approached several potential buyers. DataSphere offered the best terms and the strongest strategic fit. These are market realities, Diego, not personal attacks. So it's just coincidence that you're acquiring the company that powers our entire data infrastructure? His incredulity was almost comical. Not coincidence, I acknowledged. Strategy. Capital Tech is undervalued because companies like Martinez Financial have been squeezing their margins while becoming increasingly dependent on their services. It's an imbalanced relationship ripe for correction. You could have warned us, he said, anger giving way to something that sounded almost like hurt. Given us time to prepare alternatives. Like you warned me before dismissing my business plan, or before passing me over for the director position I was promised, or before telling potential investors to avoid my hobby project. Silence hung between us as my words landed. That was years ago, he finally said, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Business has a long memory, I replied. But for what it's worth, the acquisition doesn't have to be adversarial. The contract I presented tonight is an opening position. There's room for negotiation. You'll negotiate with us? The surprise in his voice was telling. Of course. That's what professional business leaders do. The subtle emphasis on professional wasn't lost on him. Dad and Uncle Raphael are still in the study, he admitted. They've been there for hours going through contingency plans. I've never seen them like this. For the first time that evening, I felt a twinge of genuine regret. Not for the acquisition itself, but for the shock tactics I'd employed. Was proving my point worth destabilizing a company that, despite its flaws, employed hundreds of people and served thousands of clients. Tell them to get some rest, I said, softening my tone slightly. Nothing productive happens in panic mode. Monday morning, 9 a.m., we'll find a workable solution. You promise? He sounded like the cousin I'd once built sandcastles with. At the family's lake house, before hierarchy and expectations had carved a chasm between us. I promise we'll negotiate in good faith, I clarified. The rest depends on how willing Martinez Financial is to adapt to a changing reality. After ending the call, I sat at my kitchen island, staring at the gleaming marble surface that had cost more than my first car. Everything in this penthouse represented a choice, to succeed on my own terms, to build something meaningful, to prove my worth not through inheritance, but through innovation. I opened my laptop again, reviewing the acquisition documents one more time. The terms were aggressive but not punitive. The integration plan was sound. The business case was solid. The only questionable element was the human factor, the complicated web of family dynamics that no spreadsheet could quantify. Tomorrow, I would need to make decisions about how to proceed. Would I wield my newfound leverage like a hammer, forcing Martinez Financial to accept unfavorable terms? Or would I use this opportunity to demonstrate a different kind of leadership, one based on fairness and forward thinking rather than grudges and power plays? The second option resonated with the business leader I aspired to be, rather than the wounded daughter I sometimes still felt like. But making that choice would require letting go of something I'd held on to for years, the sweet anticipation of vindication. I closed my laptop and returned to the window. The city had quieted somewhat, but Chicago never truly slept. Somewhere, in a lakefront mansion, my father and uncle were strategizing, perhaps finally recognizing that the business landscape had shifted beneath their feet while they were busy maintaining traditions and hierarchies. That recognition alone was a form of victory, perhaps the one that mattered most, not crushing them but awakening them to reality, not revenge, but reformation. With that thought, I made a decision. Monday's meeting would not be about humiliation, but about transformation. I would offer Martinez Financial a path forward, challenging but survivable. Not because they deserved mercy, but because Datasphere deserved a leader motivated by vision rather than vindication. After all, success built on spite was inherently limited. But success built on innovation and integrity, that was limitless. I picked up my phone and sent a message to my executive team. Strategy meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Topic: Martinez Financial. Integration, revised approach. Then I sent one more text, this one to my father. Come prepared on Monday, not with excuses or resentment, but with recognition and readiness. The past is written, but the future is still negotiable. His response came quicker than I expected. We'll be ready. And Olivia? I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared as he typed a second message. Your mother would have been proud. I set the phone down, unexpectedly moved by words I'd never thought I'd hear from Gabriel Martinez. Perhaps there was more to rebuild here than just business relationships. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and decisions. But tonight, I allowed myself to savor not just the satisfaction of surprising my family, but the deeper fulfillment of knowing I had built something valuable entirely on my own terms. That was a victory no one could diminish or take away, not even the Martinezes. Sunday morning arrived with the crystalline clarity that often follows emotional storms. I woke before my alarm, the winter sunlight streaming through floor to ceiling, windows I'd deliberately left uncurtained. In my world, there was power in seeing the dawn break, a daily reminder that new beginnings were always possible. I moved through my morning routine with deliberate focus. 30 minutes of meditation, 40 minutes on the Peloton, a protein-rich breakfast prepared in my minimalist kitchen. Each element represented a choice made with intention, the opposite of the reactive, tradition-bound existence I'd rejected. At precisely 9:45 a.m., I entered Datasphere's downtown headquarters. Sunday or not, I knew my executive team would be waiting. We occupied 3 floors of a sleek glass tower, a far cry from Martinez Financial's neoclassical limestone edifice with its marble columns and oak-paneled boardrooms. Their building screamed old money and established power. Ours whispered innovation and adaptability. Morning, team, I greeted the 7 faces gathered around our conference table. A single slab of reclaimed redwood that had cost more than most people's cars, but without the ostentatious flourishes my family would have added. Zoe nodded from her position at my right hand, tablet ready. Morning, Liv. Everyone's here except Legal, who's on a video call patching in from New York in 2 minutes. I scanned the faces around the table. Zoe Chen, COO and my first hire. Marcus Washington, CTO and architectural genius behind our core. Algorithms. Priya Sharma, CFO poached from a Fortune 50 company. Derek Williams, the overzealous integration director looking appropriately contrite. And 3 department heads responsible for client services, product development, and marketing. This was my true family now, the people who had believed in my vision when blood relatives had dismissed it as a hobby. Before we start, I said, taking my seat, I want to address last night's system incident. I looked directly at Derek, whose complexion had gone slightly ashen. Derek, I understand you initiated preliminary restrictions on Martinez Financial's data access without authorization. He swallowed visibly. Yes, Ms. Martinez, I misinterpreted the integration timeline and wanted to run a systems check to ensure we could implement the restrictions when needed. I didn't intend for it to affect their operations and didn't realize the cascading effect it would have. It was an error in judgment, and I take full responsibility. In the old Martinez world, this would be when the public flogging began, a ritualistic humiliation designed to establish dominance and instill fear. I could almost hear Uncle Raphael's booming voice. Incompetence has no place in this organization. But that wasn't my leadership style. Thank you for your honesty, I said. Mistakes happen in complex integrations. What matters is how quickly we identify, correct, and learn from them. Zoe tells me you worked until 2 a.m. establishing new safeguards for the transition. Is that correct? Derek nodded, surprise evident in his expression. Yes. I've implemented a triple-check protocol for all system changes and created an automated monitoring system that will alert us to any unintended service degradations. Good, I said. Document that for the team, and let's move forward. The measure of excellence isn't perfection. It's how we respond when things go wrong. The tension visibly left his shoulders, and I caught appreciative glances from several team members. This was how you built loyalty. Not through fear, but through fairness. Now, I continued as our general counsel joined via video conference, let's discuss our revised approach to Martinez Financial. As you know, I presented them with our initial terms on Thursday evening, which were deliberately aggressive, Priya noted, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Our CFO had a particular appreciation for strategic financial maneuvering. Yes, I acknowledged. The initial terms were designed to establish our leverage. However, after reflection, I believe a more collaborative approach will yield better long-term results. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're going soft on them? After everything they did? The question hung in the air, loaded with context. My executive team knew my history. They'd heard the stories of dismissal and condescension over late-night strategy sessions and celebration dinners as DataSphere grew. Not soft, I clarified. Strategic. There's a difference between revenge and reformation. I don't want to cripple Martinez Financial. I want to transform it. Transform it how? Zoe asked, already typing notes. I stood, moving to the glass wall overlooking Chicago's business district. From here, I could just make out the roofline of Martinez Financial's headquarters, a building that had once represented everything I couldn't achieve. Martinez Financial has 3 core problems, I explained, turning back to face my team. First, technological stagnation. They've outsourced innovation rather than building internal capabilities. Second, leadership calcification. The same voices have been making decisions for decades with no fresh perspectives. Third, cultural inertia. They're so committed to how things have always been done that they've missed multiple market evolutions. Heads nodded around the table. These weren't revelations to this group of industry disruptors. But, I continued, they also have 3 significant assets. An established client base of high-net-worth individuals, a sterling reputation for client service, and extensive relationships throughout the traditional financial sector. I returned to my seat, pulling up a presentation on the main screen. Here's what I'm proposing. Instead of simply charging them premium rates for continued access to Capital Tech's systems, we offer them a transformational partnership. For the next hour, we crafted a comprehensive proposal. Rather than merely being DataSphere's client, Martinez Financial would become our showcase implementation partner. We would integrate our most advanced analytics capabilities directly into their operations, creating a hybrid model that preserved their strengths while addressing their weaknesses. The terms were still financially advantageous for DataSphere, but offered Martinez Financial a path to technological relevance rather than obsolescence. More importantly, the partnership would require structural changes at Martinez Financial, including the creation of a Technology Innovation Committee with significant authority, a committee I would chair. This is elegant, Priya admitted as we finalized the numbers. The 5-year projection shows both entities growing faster together than either would separately. And it's a perfect case study for other traditional financial institutions, added our marketing director. If the venerable Martinez Financial can evolve, anyone can. As the meeting concluded, Zoe lingered behind while others filed out. "This isn't what you planned originally," she observed once we were alone. "Thursday night you were out for blood." I smiled wryly. Thursday night, I was still the daughter trying to prove her worth. Today, I'm the CEO making the best decision for my company. "And if they reject the offer?" she asked, always the pragmatist. "Then we implement the original terms and watch them struggle until they're forced to accept reality," I replied matter-of-factly. "I'm offering transformation, not surrender, but they need to meet me halfway." Zoe nodded, satisfied. "I'll have everything ready for tomorrow's meeting. 9 a.m. sharp, correct?" "Absolutely. And Zoe, make sure the conference room setup sends exactly the right message. Professional, forward-looking, but with no hint of compromise." "On it," she replied with a knowing smile. The perfect balance of olive branch and steel backbone. After she left, I spent another hour reviewing the proposal, ensuring every detail aligned with both our business objectives and my personal principles. This approach wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about refusing to let it dictate the future, not erasing the wounds, but ensuring they became sources of strength rather than festering resentments. My phone buzzed with an unexpected notification. Diego had tagged me in a social media post. Curious, I opened it to find a throwback photo from 15 years ago. The two of us at a family lake house, holding up a trophy from the sailing competition we'd won as teenagers. His caption read simply, "Remember when we were on the same team? Family complicated. You respect the hustle." The post caught me off guard. Diego, the perennial Martinez loyalist, publicly acknowledging both our former connection and my current success? This suggested shifts occurring within the family dynamic that I hadn't anticipated. A moment later, my phone rang. Marco this time. "Olivia," he began without preamble. "I need to understand something before tomorrow's meeting." "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Is this about destroying the company, or is there an actual path forward you're willing to consider?" Direct and to the point, the one quality I'd always appreciated about my brother despite our differences. "There's a path," I confirmed, "but it requires real change, not cosmetic adjustments." His sigh carried a mixture of relief and trepidation. "That's good to hear. Dad and Uncle Raphael have been in crisis mode since Thursday night. I've never seen them this shaken." "Good," I said, perhaps more sharply than intended. "They needed shaking." "Agreed," he replied, surprising me. "Look, I know I've been part of the problem. When you brought that proposal years ago, I should have backed you. I saw the merit in it, but I chose the easy path of going along with Dad instead of standing up for what I knew made business sense." The admission was unexpected, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally asked. "Because tomorrow isn't just about business contracts," he said quietly. "It's about whether the Martinez name means anything more than just a corporate logo. And I wanted you to know that at least one family member recognizes that you built something remarkable entirely on your own terms." The conversation left me contemplative. I'd been prepared for anger, for desperate negotiation attempts, even for threats. But not for recognition. Not for what sounded dangerously close to respect. I spent the remainder of Sunday finalizing preparations for Monday's meeting, stopping only for a brief video call with my executive coach, a former tech CEO who had helped me navigate the psychological challenges of rapid growth and intensifying public scrutiny. "Remember," she advised after I explained the situation, "true leadership is revealed not when we have all the power, but in how we wield the power we have. Anyone can dominate. Few can transform." Her words stayed with me as Monday morning arrived. I dressed with particular care. A tailored charcoal suit that projected authority without flamboyance, accessorized with a single piece of statement jewelry. A platinum pendant shaped like a sphere. Datasphere's logo representing the global interconnectedness of information. I arrived at the office an hour early, reviewing the conference room setup and briefing the reception team. The Martinez delegation will arrive at 9, I instructed. Offer them coffee, but don't take them to the conference room until exactly 9. Not earlier, not later. In business negotiations, as in chess, timing and positioning mattered. The Martinez family had always controlled these elements in our previous interactions. Today would be different. At precisely 8:58 a.m., Zoe appeared at my office door. They're here, all of them. All? I raised an eyebrow. Define all. Your father, Uncle Raphael, Marco, Diego, and 2 people I don't recognize, likely their legal counsel. I nodded, gathering my materials. Perfect. Let's not keep them waiting any longer than planned. At exactly 9 a.m., I entered the conference room where the Martinez contingent stood in a tight cluster, their body language betraying nervous energy despite expensive suits and carefully neutral expressions. Good morning, I greeted them, extending my hand first to my father, a deliberate choice that established both professional courtesy and the new hierarchy. Thank you for coming. My father's handshake was firm, but lacked its usual domineering pressure. Olivia, you have our attention. Clearly, I replied with a small smile, acknowledging the obvious. Once everyone was seated, the Martinez delegation on one side, my team on the other, with me at the head of the table, I opened the meeting. Before we begin, I want to establish that this is a business negotiation between professional entities. Historical family dynamics are irrelevant to these proceedings. Uncle Raphael shifted uncomfortably, but nodded along with the others. However, I continued, holding my father's gaze, I would be remiss not to acknowledge that those dynamics shaped the path that led us here today. When I presented my business vision to Martinez Financial 7 years ago, it was dismissed without serious consideration. That rejection became the catalyst for building Datasphere as an independent entity. We made a mistake, my father admitted, the words seeming to physically pain him. That has become abundantly clear. Yes, I agreed simply, but today isn't about relitigating that mistake. It's about determining whether Martinez Financial is capable of evolution or destined for obsolescence. I nodded to Zoe, who distributed copies of our proposal while an electronic version appeared on the room's main screen. What you're receiving isn't just a service contract for continued Capital Tech access, I explained. It's a comprehensive partnership framework that would position Martinez Financial at the forefront of data-driven wealth management. The next 2 hours unfolded in intense but productive discussion. To their credit, once the initial shock wore off, the Martinez team engaged substantively with the proposal. Marco proved particularly insightful about implementation challenges, while one of their attorneys raised valid questions about regulatory compliance that we addressed with pre-prepared analyses. Uncle Raphael, traditionally the family's most forceful personality, remained uncharacteristically reserved until we reached the section on governance changes. This Technology Innovation Committee, he said, finally breaking his silence, with Olivia as chairperson and authority over system architecture decisions. This effectively gives Datasphere control over our core operations. It gives the committee oversight of technological implementation, I corrected. Strategic business decisions remain with Martinez Financial leadership. But yes, it creates a structural mechanism to ensure technological considerations aren't relegated to afterthoughts in business planning. It changes the fundamental power, structure of our organization, he pressed, a hint of the old Raphael emerging. Yes, I acknowledged without apology. Because your current structure produced decisions that left you vulnerable to precisely this situation. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different results. My father leaned forward. And if we find these governance changes unacceptable? I met his gaze steadily. Then you're welcome to find another data services provider and analytics platform by the end of the month when your Capital Tech access expires. I'm sure your clients will understand the resulting service disruptions. The statement hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone present. Martinez Financial couldn't function without these systems, and creating alternatives would take months, if not years. Diego, who had been quiet throughout the technical discussions, suddenly chuckled, a sound so unexpected in the tense atmosphere that all heads turned toward him. "She's got us," he said, shaking his head with what looked remarkably like admiration. "Completely outmaneuvered, just like that sailing competition when we were teenagers. Remember, Dad? When Olivia calculated the wind patterns while the rest of us relied on instinct?" My father's expression softened slightly at the memory. "You plotted the entire course before the race even started." "I did," I confirmed. "And I've been plotting this particular course for 7 years. The only question remaining is whether Martinez Financial will adapt to the new prevailing winds or continue sailing into the headwind." After a moment of charged silence, my father turned to Uncle Raphael. Some unspoken communication passed between them, decades of partnership distilled into a glance and a nod. "We'll need to make amendments to certain provisions," my father said, turning back to me. "The committee structure, the implementation timeline, some of the financial terms." "We anticipated that," I replied, nodding to our legal counsel who produced a secondary document. "These are our acceptable parameters for negotiation. Anything within these boundaries we can discuss. Anything outside them is non-negotiable." For the next hour, we engaged in the detailed work of crafting agreement. The Martinez team pushed back where expected, conceded where necessary, and occasionally suggested genuinely innovative compromises. I found myself impressed by their adaptability once the initial shock had worn off. By late afternoon, we had reached the framework of an agreement. Not the complete capitulation I had once dreamed of forcing upon them, but something potentially more valuable. A partnership that acknowledged both my authority and their experience, that respected history without being imprisoned by it. As legal teams finalized language and executives reviewed implementation details, I found myself momentarily alone with my father in a quiet corner of the conference room. "You built something remarkable," he said quietly, looking out at the, Chicago skyline. "Something I didn't believe was possible." "I know," I replied simply. He turned to face me fully. "Your mother always said you would surprise us all one day. That your different way of seeing the world wasn't wrong, just ahead of its time." The mention of my mother created an unexpected tightness in my throat. She never doubted me, even when she didn't fully understand what I was building. "She was wiser than the rest of us," he acknowledged. Then, after a pause, "The family is having dinner tonight at Le Bernardin to process everything that's happened. Would you consider joining us? Not as DataSphere's CEO, but as Olivia Martinez?" The invitation caught me off guard. Part of me, the wounded daughter who had rehearsed triumph scenarios for years, wanted to refuse, to maintain the professional distance that had protected me from further disappointment. But another part, the leader who had just advocated for transformation over destruction, recognized that true victory might lie in reconciliation rather than continued estrangement. "I'll think about it," I said carefully. "But first, let's finish making this deal official." As we rejoined the others for the final review, I caught Diego watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. When our eyes met, he gave a small nod that somehow contained both acknowledgement of defeat and recognition of achievement. By 5 p.m., the documents were signed. Martinez Financial and DataSphere were now officially partners, bound by contracts that would transform both organizations. As we gathered for the obligatory handshake photos, I realized that what I felt wasn't the vindictive satisfaction I had anticipated for so long. It was something more complex, pride in what I had built, certainly, but also a quiet acknowledgement that legacies weren't only things to be rejected or overthrown. Sometimes they could be reimagined and renewed. When the Martinez delegation departed, my father with a formal, "We'll see you tonight, I hope," and Diego with an informal fist bump that made Zoe's eyebrows shoot up, my team gathered around with expectant faces. "Well?" Zoe finally asked. "How does victory feel?" I considered the question carefully, looking at the signed contracts and then at the team who had made them possible. It feels like a beginning, not an ending, and that's exactly as it should be. After all, true success wasn't measured in moments of triumph, but in sustained impact. Not in who bowed to whom, but in what we built together. And what we were building now was just getting started. 3 months after the transformative Thanksgiving that shattered and rebuilt my family's perceptions, I stood at the podium of the Grand Ballroom at Chicago's Peninsula Hotel. 500 pairs of eyes focused on me. Financial industry leaders, technology innovators, business journalists, and yes, the entire Martinez clan, now seated prominently in the front row rather than hiding me away at distant tables. "Disruption isn't destruction," I began, my voice steady as it carried through the perfect acoustics. "It's revelation. It reveals what's enduring and what's merely been preserved through habit or fear." When we launched the Martinez Datasphere partnership initiative 90 days ago, many industry analysts predicted failure. They said traditional wealth management couldn't integrate with cutting-edge predictive analytics without losing its essential character. I paused, looking directly at Uncle Raphael, whose skepticism had gradually transformed into cautious enthusiasm over weeks of implementation. Those analysts misunderstood what wealth management's essential character truly is. It isn't mahogany panels or leather chairs or exclusive club memberships. It's trust. Trust built through results, transparency, and the ability to navigate changing financial landscapes on behalf of clients. The journey to this moment, standing before the financial industry's elite, announcing quarterly results that had exceeded even our most optimistic projections, had been neither straight nor smooth. The initial merger of our operations had revealed incompatibilities in everything from data structures to meeting protocols. Cultural clashes erupted weekly as Datasphere's agile innovators collided with Martinez Financial's meticulous traditionalists. But we had persevered, not by forcing one culture to dominate the other, but by identifying the strengths in each and creating something new. In just 90 days, I continued, client portfolio performance has improved by an average of 3% compared to industry benchmarks. Risk assessment accuracy has increased by 7%. Client satisfaction metrics have reached all-time highs. And perhaps most remarkably, employee engagement scores have risen across both organizations. I clicked to the next slide, showing two organizational cultures gradually intertwining like DNA strands. This isn't just a technology integration story. It's a human one. It's about recognizing that different perspectives aren't obstacles to overcome. They're advantages to leverage. My gaze found my father in the front row. He gave the smallest of nods, a gesture that 3 months ago would have seemed impossible. The man who had once dismissed my ideas as impractical was now their strongest advocate in traditional financial circles. None of this happened overnight, I acknowledged, clicking to a timeline slide. And none of it happened without conflict. When traditions spanning generations meet innovations developing at exponential speeds, friction is inevitable. The question isn't whether you'll experience resistance, it's how you'll respond to it. The next 30 minutes walked through our integration process with unflinching honesty, the setbacks and breakthroughs, the difficult conversations and unexpected alliances. I shared the framework we'd developed for balancing innovation with stability, highlighting specific client success stories that demonstrated the power of our combined approach. As I concluded, the applause was immediate and sustained. Industry leaders who had once regarded me as Gabriel Martinez's impractical daughter now approached with business cards and partnership proposals. Journalists who had initially covered our merger with skepticism now requested exclusive interviews about the future of financial services. Through it all, I maintained the same centered calm that had carried me from that Thanksgiving revelation to this moment of industry recognition. Success wasn't measured in applause or headlines, but in sustainable impact and authentic growth. "Quite a performance," Diego remarked, appearing at my elbow after I'd navigated the initial wave of congratulations. "You never mentioned the part where you brought us to our knees at Thanksgiving dinner." I smiled, accepting a sparkling water from a passing server. That wouldn't have served the narrative. "And you're all about the strategic narrative these days," he observed, his tone light but perceptive. "The ruthless avenger has become the visionary unifier." "I'm the same person I always was," I corrected him. "You're just seeing more dimensions now." Diego considered this, swirling his bourbon thoughtfully. "Maybe. Or maybe you've evolved, too." The Olivia from Thanksgiving night might not have invited us all to dinner the following week. She certainly wouldn't have created a genuine partnership where both companies actually benefit. The Olivia from Thanksgiving night had just won a battle, I acknowledged. The Olivia standing here realized there was more value in winning the peace. He clinked his glass against mine. "Well, I for one am glad to be on the same team again, even if you're clearly the captain now." As Diego moved away to join a group of young analysts, my father approached. In the 3 months since our partnership began, our relationship had undergone its own careful reconstruction. Not a return to what it had been, that was impossible and undesirable, but the formation of something new. A relationship between equals with different but complementary strengths. "You've exceeded all projections," he said, the former criticism in his voice replaced by genuine respect. "The board is unanimously supporting the expanded integration initiative." "Even Uncle Raphael?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Especially Raphael," he confirmed with a small smile. Though he'd never admit it, he's become rather enamored with the predictive analytics dashboard your team created for him. I caught him showing it off to the goldsmiths at the club last week. I laughed, imagining my tradition-bound uncle excitedly demonstrating technology he would have dismissed as nonsense 6 months ago. "He's adaptable when he wants to be," I acknowledged. "That's why Martinez Financial survived for 3 generations when most family businesses fail in one." My father nodded, his expression growing more reflective. "You know, I've been thinking about what your mother used to say about you, that you had your grandmother's vision but none of her fear." "I never met her," I said, surprised by the comparison. "She died before you were born, but she was the true force behind the original Martinez investment firm. My father was the public face, but she was the strategist. She could see patterns and opportunities no one else noticed." He paused, straightening his already impeccable tie. "She also faced constant dismissal from the men in the industry, had to fight for every inch of respect." The parallel was clear, and unexpected coming from him. "Why didn't you ever tell me this before?" "Because I didn't truly understand it until I watched you these past 3 months, he admitted. "Leading through transformation requires a different kind of strength than maintaining the status quo. I mastered the latter but feared the former. You embody it naturally." Coming from Gabriel Martinez, this was equivalent to a 20-minute standing ovation. "Thank you," I said simply. "Don't thank me," he replied. "I'm merely stating facts, as you've trained us all to do." Speaking of which, the Wilson account representatives are trying to catch your attention by the south entrance. Major potential expansion opportunity there. And just like that, we were back to business. But something fundamental had shifted. My father was now pointing out opportunities to me, rather than questioning my ability to recognize them. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of strategic conversations, potential partnerships, and media interviews. By the time the event concluded, I had secured commitments for 3 major new client migrations and preliminary discussions for 2 potential acquisitions that would further expand our technological capabilities. "Successful night," Zoe commented, as we gathered our materials after the crowd had dispersed. "Though I notice you never once used the word revenge or vindication in your speech." "Those emotions make poor business strategies," I replied, packing my tablet into its case. They might fuel the initial drive, but they can't sustain meaningful growth." "Speaking from experience?" she asked with a knowing look. "Extensively," I acknowledged. "Remember our 3rd funding round pitch meeting? When that VC asked if I was emotionally equipped to lead a major enterprise?" Zoe rolled her eyes. That patronizing dinosaur. I wanted to throw my coffee in his face. "I almost did," I admitted. But instead, I thanked him for his concern and proceeded to outline our growth strategy in such detail that he couldn't follow it. 2 days later, we had 4 competing offers at higher valuations. "And now that same VC firm is begging for a meeting about the next round," Zoe noted with satisfaction. "Which we'll take, without a hint of resentment," I confirmed. "Because the goal isn't to punish those who underestimated us. It's to build something so undeniable they have no choice but to recognize its value." As we made our way toward the exit, my phone buzzed with a notification from one of our monitoring systems. The integration of a major client dataset had completed successfully, 2 days ahead of schedule. Another milestone in our expanding ecosystem. Outside, the Chicago winter had delivered a fresh blanket of snow, transforming the urban landscape into something pristine and possibility-filled. My driver waited with the car, but I found myself reluctant to end this pivotal evening so quickly. "I think I'll walk for a bit," I told Zoe, who looked at me like I'd suggested swimming in Lake Michigan. "In those heels? In this weather? Are you having some kind of existential moment?" I laughed. "Maybe. I'll catch up with you tomorrow for the implementation review." Once alone, I began walking along Michigan Avenue, the famous Magnificent Mile now quieter as the evening deepened. The cold air was clarifying, helping me process the significance of what we'd accomplished in just 3 months. When I'd walked into that Thanksgiving dinner, I'd been focused on a singular moment of triumph, the look on their faces when they realized I held their fate in my hands. What I hadn't anticipated was everything that would follow: the challenge of creating genuine integration, the satisfaction of solving complex problems collaboratively, the unexpected healing of wounds I'd thought permanent. My phone buzzed again, an email from an industry publication requesting an interview about leadership lessons from the Martinez Datasphere Partnership. The subject line read, "From family black sheep to industry visionary." I smiled, thinking of all the unwritten chapters in that transformation, the late nights agonizing over integration protocols, the heated debates with Uncle Raphael about client communication strategies, the breakthrough moment when Marco developed a hybrid approach that combined Datasphere's algorithmic precision with Martinez Financial's human insight. None of it had been easy. All of it had been worth it. As I reached the Chicago River, I paused to watch the water flowing beneath partially frozen sections, finding metaphorical resonance in the image. Beneath the rigid structures, adaptability and movement continued. The river knew something essential about survival that many organizations forgot. Rigidity breaks under pressure, while flow finds new paths forward. I was about to turn back when I noticed a familiar figure leaning against the railing a short distance away. Diego, apparently also needing a moment of reflection after the evening's events. "Shouldn't you be networking with potential clients?" I called out as I approached. He turned, unsurprised to find me there. "I networked enough for one night, needed some air to process everything." "Same," I admitted, joining him at the railing. For a moment, we stood in companionable silence, watching the interplay of city lights on ice and water. Do you remember, Diego finally asked, when we were kids and used to build those elaborate snow forts at the lake house? You always insisted on drawing blueprints first while the rest of us just wanted to start piling snow. I laughed at the memory. And my forts were always the ones that survived the first thaw because I built proper drainage channels. Exactly. He nodded. You were thinking about sustainability while we were focused on immediate impact. Nothing's changed, has it? Some things have, I countered. I've learned the value of immediate impact. You've learned the importance of sustainability. He considered this. Fair point. We've both evolved. After a pause, he added, I want you to know something. That Thanksgiving night after you left, I defended you to the family, told them you'd earned the right to upend everything. This was news to me. I thought you were firmly in the family loyalty camp. I was, he acknowledged, until I realized that true loyalty means challenging the trajectory when it's headed toward a cliff. You saw the cliff years before any of us admitted it existed. His admission carried a weight beyond business strategy. It represented a fundamental shift in how my family understood loyalty itself, not as blind adherence to tradition, but as commitment to collective thriving, even when that required painful change. We're building something better than either of us could have created alone, I said. That's worth more than being right or winning some old argument. Diego nodded thoughtfully. So what's next? Now that you've conquered the financial world and reformed the family dynasty, what mountain does Olivia Martinez climb next? The question deserved serious consideration. In truth, I had been contemplating our next evolution for weeks, mapping possibilities with the same methodical approach that had built Datasphere from concept to industry leader. The wealth management transformation was just the first application, I explained. The real opportunity is using our combined capabilities to democratize financial intelligence, bringing institutional-grade insights to populations traditionally underserved by firms like Martinez Financial. Diego's eyebrows rose. Uncle Raphael will have a coronary if you suggest offering Martinez services to the masses. Not if we demonstrate that it opens entirely. New revenue streams without diluting the premium brand, I countered. The Datasphere algorithms can scale affordably to serve different market segments through differentiated platforms. Always 3 steps ahead, he remarked with a mixture of admiration and amusement. You're not just redefining the family business. You're reimagining the entire industry model. Why stop at incremental change when transformation is possible? I replied. The financial systems that served previous generations won't meet the needs of the next. Either we evolve deliberately, or we become irrelevant eventually. As we turned to walk back toward the hotel where cars and drivers waited, Diego asked, the question that many in my position might consider, but few discuss openly, was it worth it? The years of being underestimated, dismissed, pushed to the margins of family gatherings? Would you do it all again knowing what you know now? I considered the layers within his question. Would I choose the same path of rejection, isolation, and arduous independent building? Or would I prefer a reality where my ideas had been embraced from the beginning, where my journey had been supported rather than opposed? Every dismissal sharpened my focus, I finally answered. Every closed door forced me to find another path. Every underestimation became fuel for exceeding expectations. So yes, if erasing those challenges meant removing the strength they built in me, I wouldn't change a thing. We reached the hotel entrance where staff still bustled around, clearing the last evidence of the evening's event. Though, I added, with a small smile, I wouldn't mind if future generations could build great things without first being told all the reasons they'll fail. Working on that, Diego assured me. My daughters are already asking about internships at Cousin Olivia's. Cool company. They think you walk on water. The mention of the next generation brought everything full circle. Perhaps that was the true measure of transformation. not just changing present circumstances, but altering future possibilities. Creating spaces where young women with unconventional ideas wouldn't face the reflexive dismissal I had encountered. "Tell them to bring their best ideas," I said. "And tell them not to worry if those ideas don't fit into existing boxes. The most valuable innovations rarely do." As we parted ways, Diego to join a gathering of younger Martinez associates, me to my waiting car, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with financial metrics or industry accolades. The real victory wasn't in proving my family wrong, but in creating a new paradigm where being right or wrong mattered less than being willing to evolve. The driver opened my car door, and before stepping in, I took one last look at the Chicago skyline, the traditional financial district buildings now standing, alongside modern glass towers in a visual representation of exactly what we were building, a bridge between established wisdom and emerging possibilities. My phone buzzed with a final message for the evening, from my father. "Your mother would have been beyond proud. So am I." 6 simple words that once would have been my ultimate validation. Now they were merely a welcome acknowledgement of a journey whose value I had already recognized for myself. As the car pulled away from the curb, I made a mental note to schedule time with our foundation team in the morning. The next phase of our evolution, expanding access to financial intelligence beyond traditional wealth circles, would require careful planning and bold execution. The work of transformation was never truly complete, but then that was precisely what made it worthwhile. The path from being underestimated to becoming undeniable wasn't a straight line or a single moment of triumph. It was a continuous process of building, learning, and evolving. Sometimes in harmony with others, sometimes in opposition, but always moving forward with clarity of purpose. For anyone walking a similar path, overlooked, dismissed, relegated to the far end of the table, I wanted my story to offer not just inspiration but practical truth. Your vision doesn't require their permission to become reality. Your worth isn't determined by their recognition, and success built on authentic value speaks for itself, eventually so loudly that even those who dismissed you have no choice but to listen. The real power was never in making them beg for my signature. It was in creating something so necessary that their recognition became inevitable, and ultimately irrelevant to my sense of accomplishment. That was the lesson I would share with Diego's daughters and anyone else scaling mountains that others claim are unclimbable. Don't waste energy trying to prove critics wrong. Channel that energy into proving your vision right. The rest will follow naturally, in its own time. And when it does, you might discover that the most meaningful victory isn't domination, but transformation. Not just of circumstances or organizations, but of relationships, perspectives, and possibilities for generations to come. 1 year after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I stood at the window of my expanded office in what was now officially the Martinez Datasphere Tower, a gleaming addition to Chicago's skyline that symbolized the full integration of our companies and philosophies. The building itself embodied our merged vision, the solid foundation of traditional finance supporting floors of glass and steel where innovation flourished, all culminating in a rooftop garden that served as both sustainable design element and metaphor for growth. A gentle knock at my door pulled me from my reflections. My executive assistant Maya entered, tablet in hand. "The team is assembled in the vision room," she informed me. "And your father just arrived with the board members." "Perfect timing," I replied, gathering the materials for today's pivotal presentation. "Let's not keep them waiting." The path to this moment, unveiling our most ambitious initiative yet, had been marked by continued evolution, both professional and personal. The Martinez Datasphere merger had exceeded every projection, establishing a new paradigm in financial services that competitors were scrambling to emulate. But today's announcement would take us beyond mere business success into territory with potential for genuine societal impact. As I walked through the executive floor, employees nodded respectfully or offered quick words of encouragement. The culture we'd built blended the best elements of both organizations. The meticulous attention to detail that had been the Martinez hallmark with the innovative spirit and technological fluency of DataSphere. The results spoke for themselves. Record client satisfaction, industry-leading returns, and a workplace ranked among the top 5 financial employers nationally. I paused briefly before entering the vision room, centering myself for what would be a defining moment in our company's trajectory. Then I pushed open the doors to face the assembled leadership. "Good morning, everyone," I greeted them, moving confidently to the head of the table, where once I would have been relegated to the furthest seat. "Thank you for making time for this special session." Around the table sat the merged leadership team, half from the original Martinez Financial, half from DataSphere, now functioning as a seamless unit despite their different origins. My father and Uncle Raphael represented the old guard, while Zoe and our technology executives embodied the new direction. The company's board members, a diverse group we had carefully constructed to include both financial veterans and technology visionaries, completed the assembly. "Today," I began, activating the room's immersive display system, "we take the next step in our evolution. Over the past year, we've proven that traditional financial expertise and cutting-edge technology can create something greater than the sum of their parts. We've delivered unprecedented value to our traditional high-net-worth clients." Nods of agreement around the table. The numbers were undeniable. Portfolio performance had consistently outpaced benchmarks by margins that had financial media calling it the Martinez DataSphere miracle. "But we've only scratched the surface of what's possible," I continued, bringing up our first visualization. A multi-dimensional map showing financial access disparities across demographic and geographic segments. While we've excelled at serving the top 1%, we've ignored a massive untapped market and, more importantly, a critical societal need. Uncle Raphael shifted slightly in his seat, still uncomfortable with any suggestion that the Martinez name might extend beyond elite circles. But he remained silent, a significant evolution from the man who once would have immediately dismissed such considerations as irrelevant to our business model. "Our analysis shows that 63% of Americans lack access to sophisticated financial guidance," I explained, zooming in on specific data clusters. "Not because they don't have assets to manage, but because the traditional financial industry has set barriers to entry that exclude all but the wealthiest clients." My father leaned forward, his expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. "You're suggesting we lower our account minimums?" "We've discussed this before, Olivia. The service model doesn't scale cost-effectively to smaller portfolios." "Not with traditional methods," I acknowledged. "But that's precisely where our technological advantage creates unprecedented opportunity." With a gesture, I transformed the display to show our new platform architecture, a tiered system that leveraged our proprietary algorithms to provide graduated levels of financial intelligence to different market segments. Martinez DataSphere. "Access," I announced, revealing the name of our new initiative. "A suite of services that democratizes financial intelligence while maintaining our premium positioning." For the next 40 minutes, I detailed the technical infrastructure, market analysis, revenue projections, and implementation strategy. Rather than diluting our luxury brand, we would create a distinct sub-brand that leveraged our core technology, while preserving the exclusivity of the Martinez name for our highest-tier services. "The most revolutionary aspect," I explained, bringing up our pilot program results, "is that this actually enhances our premium offerings. The broader data ecosystem strengthens our predictive models, while creating new client pathways that eventually feed our traditional services as their wealth grows." By the time I concluded the presentation, even the most traditional board members were leaning forward with interest. The business case was compelling: substantial revenue growth, brand enhancement, competitive differentiation, and first-mover advantage in a massive underserved market. But I had saved the most powerful argument for last. Beyond the business, opportunity, I said, my voice softening with genuine conviction. This initiative honors the original purpose behind the Martinez legacy. When my grandfather founded this company, his goal wasn't merely to serve the wealthy, it was to help immigrants like himself build financial security and generational prosperity. My father's eyes widened slightly at this perspective on our family history, one that had been gradually overshadowed by decades of upmarket repositioning. I recently found this in our archives, I continued, displaying a scanned document. The original Martinez financial mission statement, written in my grandfather's hand, to provide the financial tools and knowledge that allow families to build secure futures, regardless of where they begin their journey. The room fell silent as the board members absorbed this forgotten piece of our heritage. Even Uncle Raphael seemed momentarily humbled by this reminder of our company's roots. Martinez Datasphere Access isn't just a business expansion, I concluded. It's a return to our founding principles, enhanced by capabilities my grandfather could never have imagined. We have the opportunity to transform financial prosperity from a privilege of the few to a possibility for the many, while building the most innovative and profitable financial institution of the next generation. The discussion that followed was robust but remarkably constructive. Board members raised legitimate questions about implementation challenges, regulatory considerations, and brand management. But the fundamental concept received unanimous support, something that would have been unthinkable a year earlier when the Martinez contingent would have reflexively protected their exclusive market positioning. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out with excited conversations already forming about next steps, my father remained behind, studying the displayed image of his father's handwritten mission statement. I'd forgotten this, he admitted quietly. Or perhaps I chose to forget it as we built our premium client base. The original vision was beautiful, I said, standing beside him. And now we have the technology to fulfill it at scale, without compromising the excellence we deliver to our existing clients. He nodded thoughtfully. Your grandfather would have been fascinated by what you've built, Olivia. He was an innovator in his own time, one of the first in our community to embrace computer-based accounting when others still did everything on paper. This was a side of my family history I'd rarely heard discussed. The innovation embedded in our origins before tradition and exclusivity became the defining characteristics. I wish I'd known him, I said. He would have recognized himself in you more than in any of us, my father replied, surprising me with his candor. The willingness to challenge conventional thinking, to see opportunities others miss. When I resisted your ideas years ago, perhaps I was really resisting the echo of his voice that I heard in yours. This unexpected moment of reflection revealed layers of family dynamics I'd never fully considered, how innovations often skip generations, how resistance to change sometimes masks fear of returning to uncomfortable origins. My father straightened his tie, shifting back to his more familiar professional demeanor. The implementation timeline seems ambitious. You'll need additional resources for the technology build-out. Already factored into the projections, I assured him. We've been quietly developing the core architecture for 6 months. A slight smile touched his lips. Still always 3 steps ahead. Some things never change. He gathered his notes and headed for the door, then paused. Thanksgiving is at my house this year. I hope you'll join us. I wouldn't miss it, replied, recognizing both the invitation and the symbolism it carried. 1 year after being the family outsider, I was now being welcomed back into the inner circle. Not because I had conformed to their expectations, but because they had evolved. To recognize the value in my difference. After he left, I remained in the vision room, reviewing the feedback notes and implementation questions raised during the meeting. The path ahead would be challenging, Transforming an industry never came without resistance, both internal and external. But the alignment we'd achieved today represented a crucial foundation. My phone buzzed with a message from Diego. "So, Access got the green light? Uncle Raphael actually voted yes? What kind of sorcery did you perform in there?" I smiled at his disbelief. No sorcery. Just irrefutable data and a reminder of our roots. "Well, whatever you did, it worked. He's in the hallway right now telling anyone who'll listen that this was his idea all along. Evolution complete." I laughed aloud at this perfect encapsulation of how change actually happens, not through dramatic confrontations, but through creating pathways for people to embrace new ideas as extensions of their existing identity rather than threats to it. Another message arrived, this one from Zoe. "Green room in 10 minutes? CNBC wants to interview you about Access. They're calling it the most significant financial inclusion initiative from a major institution in decades." Media interest was expected, but the speed and enthusiasm surprised even me. "On my way," I replied, gathering my materials. As I headed toward the broadcast suite, I passed through our innovation lab where dozens of engineers, data scientists, and financial analysts were already hard at work on the Access platform. The energy in the room was palpable. People inspired not just by technical challenges, but by the potential impact of what they were building. One young developer, recently hired from a community college in Chicago's South Side, looked up from her workstation as I passed. "Ms. Martinez," she called, uncharacteristically bold for a junior team member. "I just wanted to say, this project is why I joined the company. My parents never had access to financial guidance beyond a bank teller. This could change everything for communities like mine." Her words crystallized exactly why the Access initiative mattered beyond business metrics. "That's precisely why we're building it," I replied, "and why we need perspectives like yours at the table." The young woman beamed with pride, then quickly returned to her code, but the brief exchange lingered with me as I continued toward the green room. When I'd started DataSphere, my motivation had been partially driven by the need to prove my worth to a family that had underestimated me. But somewhere along the journey, that narrow purpose had expanded into something far more meaningful: the opportunity to transform systems that underestimated and excluded millions of people. In the green room, the production team efficiently prepared me for the interview, while Zoe briefed me on likely questions and key messages to emphasize. "Focus on the business case first," she advised. "Then the social impact. The market needs to understand this isn't philanthropy. It's forward-thinking strategy that happens to create positive change." "Got it," I nodded, as a makeup artist made final touches. Though at this point, I think the distinction is artificial. The most sustainable business models of the future will naturally generate positive social outcomes. Zoe smiled. "Save that quote for the interview. It's perfect." Minutes later, I was seated before cameras, responding to the anchor's questions with the clarity and confidence that had become my trademark in industry circles. Martinez Financial was once known as the most exclusive wealth management firm in the Midwest, the interviewer noted. Now you're leading what some analysts are calling a democratization revolution in financial services. What changed? I considered how to distill a complex journey into a concise response that honored both truth and diplomacy. What changed was our understanding of what's possible, I replied. Traditionally, high-quality financial guidance required human advisors, spending significant time with each client, naturally limiting service to those with substantial assets. Our technological breakthroughs have removed that constraint, allowing us to maintain quality while reaching previously underserved markets. But wasn't there also a significant shift in the Martinez philosophy? The interviewer pressed. Industry insiders have described dramatic changes in the company culture over the past year. Our values haven't changed, I clarified. The commitment to excellence, integrity, and client success remains constant. What's evolved is our recognition that these values can and should extend beyond traditional client segments. In many ways, we're returning to our founder's original vision, enhanced by capabilities he couldn't have imagined. The interview continued with questions about implementation timelines, competitive responses, and regulatory considerations, all of which I addressed with transparent confidence, neither overpromising nor underselling our capabilities. As the segment concluded, the interviewer asked one final question. For young entrepreneurs watching, particularly those who feel underestimated or overlooked, what lesson would you share from your journey from startup founder to transformational industry leader? The question invited a rehearsed inspirational platitude, but I opted for something more authentic. Being underestimated can be your greatest advantage if you use it correctly, I said. When people dismiss your ideas, they're not watching as you build them. When they're busy protecting what exists, they miss what's becoming possible. Don't waste energy seeking validation from those who don't share your vision. Channel that energy into making your vision so undeniably successful that their validation becomes irrelevant. After the cameras stopped rolling, the interviewer removed her earpiece and leaned forward. Off the record, I started following your story after that profile in Business Insider last year. The way you transformed rejection into revolution is remarkable. My daughter has your picture on her vision board. Her comment caught me off guard. I'm honored, though there are probably more conventional role models out there. Conventional role models are exactly what ambitious young women don't need, she replied with a knowing smile. They need to see someone who refused to shrink her, vision to fit into existing boxes, someone who changed the boxes instead. As I left the broadcast suite, her words resonated with unexpected force. In focusing on business metrics and strategic implementations, I sometimes forgot the less quantifiable impact of visibility, of demonstrating possibilities that others might not imagine for themselves without concrete examples. That evening, I left the office earlier than usual to meet Marco for dinner at a small Italian restaurant we'd frequented as children with our mother. These monthly dinners had become a tradition over the past year, a space for reconnection outside the corporate environment. Saw your interview, he said as I slid into the booth across from him. Social media is already calling Access a financial revolution. You've come a long way from being seated at the kids' table at Thanksgiving. I laughed, accepting the glass of Barolo he'd already ordered for me. The physical kids' table ended when I was 12. The metaphorical one lasted much longer. Until you flipped it over and built your own, he added with a grin. Our relationship had evolved into something I would never have predicted during those years of familial dismissal, a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and complementary strengths. Marco now led our client relationship division, blending his natural interpersonal skills with newly developed technological fluency. So, he said, after we'd ordered and the initial pleasantries were exchanged, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, something personal. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his unusually serious tone. I'm listening. All this success, the transformation, the industry recognition, has it been enough? His eyes held genuine curiosity rather than challenge. Has it filled whatever void was created when the family, failed to see your potential? The question penetrated more deeply than I expected, cutting through professional accomplishments to the human core beneath. Had external validation and business success healed those earlier wounds of dismissal and underestimation? It's not about being enough, I finally answered. Success doesn't erase the past, it contextualizes it. Those experiences of being underestimated didn't create a void. They created clarity about what I value and how I want to lead. I took a sip of wine, organizing my thoughts. The most meaningful aspect isn't proving anyone wrong. It's creating environments where others don't have to face the same obstacles, where good ideas are evaluated on merit rather than on who presents them. Marco nodded thoughtfully. You've certainly done that. The culture shift has been remarkable. I watched junior analysts present directly to Uncle Raphael now without fear. Ideas flow across hierarchy levels in ways that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago. That's the real transformation, I agreed. Not the market cap or the press coverage, but the everyday interactions that determine whose voice matters and whose potential gets developed. Our conversation shifted to family matters, upcoming projects, and the holiday plans forming for the approaching Thanksgiving, now just 2 weeks away. This year would mark a complete circle. From family, outsider to central architect of our collective future. As we finished dinner and prepared to part ways, Marco hesitated before asking one final question. If you could go back to that Thanksgiving night when you revealed your acquisition plans, would you do anything differently? I considered his question carefully. That night had been meticulously planned as a moment of triumphant revelation after years of dismissal, yet it had also been the starting point of a journey neither side could have anticipated. I wouldn't change the revelation itself, I replied. That shock was necessary to break entrenched patterns, but I might have entered with more openness to what could be built afterward. I came prepared for victory, but not for reconciliation. Well, Marco said with a small smile, it all worked out in the end. Maybe better than if you'd planned it perfectly. His observation carried wisdom worth reflecting on. Perhaps the most transformative journeys couldn't be fully mapped in advance. They required both decisive action and adaptability, the courage to create disruption and the wisdom to guide what emerged from it. As I headed home later that evening, Chicago's skyline glittering against the early winter darkness, I found myself contemplating not just the distance traveled since that Thanksgiving confrontation, but the unexpected richness of the path it had opened. The triumph I'd imagined then, making my family beg for my signature, forcing recognition of my worth, had been a limited vision compared to what had actually unfolded. The creation of something none of us could have built alone. The transformation of relationships alongside business models, the expansion of possibility not just for myself, but for everyone touched by our work. For anyone walking the difficult path of being underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed, perhaps that was the most important lesson. Vindication might be temporarily satisfying, but transformation is infinitely more powerful. The goal shouldn't merely be to prove critics wrong, but to create realities they couldn't imagine. Not just for yourself, but for all those who will follow. And in that creation lies not just success, but significance. Not just achievement, but lasting impact. Not just personal victory, but collective evolution. That was a signature worth having. One written not just on contracts and company documents, but on the expanding possibilities we create for others through our refusal to be diminished by limited perceptions. Up next, you've got 2 more stand out. Stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.